Okay, what we're doing here is we're measuring our end play on the input shaft in thousandths, and I've set my dial indicator up, zeroed it out, and I'm going to simply just gently pull this shaft out. Sounds a little dirty, doesn't it? Okay, it stops, and the reading is right between 40 and 50 thousandths, so I'd say about it's closer to 46 thousandths. So we'll call it, say 46 thousandths. Now that's on the loose side because the Mopar specs give it from, let's see, specs on that should be from 16 thousandths to 59 thousandths. So 46 thousandths is on the loose side. It's probably okay. But as we go through this, we're going to double check everything. So I'm going to write that down. You always do that before you disassemble this thing. Always take that reading. Don't guess at it, because that thing could be too tight, could be too loose. So there's a thrust washer on these. It's in a different place on a 904 than it is a 727. On a 904, it's between the end of the input shaft and the front end of the output shaft. This shaft and that one that comes out the back are not connected to each other. So anyway, you have to have clearance between them, because thrust clearance, because you don't want the end of one grinding on the other. So anyway, that's pretty simply put, but take that reading and write it down so you know what it is. And then as we go through this, we will dig in a little bit as far as information goes and what we need to find out, and see if we need to change that thrust washer and tighten that clearance up. Onward. Okay, next step, we're going to go into the pan on this thing and take the valve body off. So at this stage, they say to put this in a holding fixture. Well, I don't have a holding fixture, so what I decided to do is make my own, which is going to consist of two of these pieces of I guess that's 4x4, and that way it'll keep it from rolling away on us. Looks pretty good to me. So all we're going to do at this step is we're going to take out these pan bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 pan bolts. No, I'm only kidding. We're going to count those again. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pan bolts. Now the pan on a 727 looks pretty similar to this, but it's larger. In fact, the transmission of 727 is larger in most dimensions. So you know, you can't just go in and put a 727 pan on a 904 and vice versa. Now, if you ever buy a filter for one of these, a 904 or 999 or 998, anything with a 9 is just a variation of a 904. May have more clutch packs, things of that nature, but they're vastly similar. But if you ever buy a filter for one, you'll notice that you get one filter and two different kinds of gaskets. One gasket obviously fits, one gasket will not. That's because that the filter is the same between a 904 and a 727, but like I said, the pan's different. So I'm not going to bore you with taking pan bolts out and subject you to having to watch that. All I'm going to do is just use my common ratchet and 1/2-inch socket. And I've had this pan off already, so it's not torqued down. And I'm just going to pull these all out, and then we'll lift the pan off. Okay, we're in. So I thought I would take this time to show you what all this stuff that's in this oil pan that's in here, what this is. Now I know that's kind of a simple way of putting it, but it's good for you to know what these things are before you start tearing all this out of here, because we're about to get to the point where we're going to remove the valve body. This is the valve body here, and we've got a couple other things to deal with along the way as we go, so we need to go ahead and just do a little quick tutorial what's what. Now of course this is a valve body, and what a valve body is, basically the valve body performs the same function to this transmission as your brain performs to your body. It controls what happens in this transmission at all times. It's hydraulically operated, means it uses hydraulic fluid pressure, which is generated by the transmission pump, which is generated by turning the input to the pump right here. So that runs at engine speed thereabouts at all time, creates hydraulic pressure. Then you have a series of valves in here that, depending on where the gear shift lever is, park, reverse, neutral, drive, second, low, whatever, routes fluid in different directions and does different things. And now that's a simple way of putting it, but that's the basics. This is responsible for either not sending fluid to any of the clutch packs, or to the forward clutch pack or the rear clutch pack. So you know, gives you your different gears and so on and so forth. So basically this is a hydraulic brain is what this is. And what we do at first, we're going to remove this out of the transmission, and then the way we're going to approach this is we're not going to disassemble our sub-assemblies first. We're just going to get every sub-assembly out of this transmission. This is called a sub-assembly, which means it's part of the overall picture here. But we'll take this out, we'll set it aside. You have a couple other things staring in the face here. This is the front servo. This is also known as the kickdown servo. And what a kickdown servo is, or what a servo is, if any of you mess with electronics, you know you've heard of servo motors. Servo just essentially means that in this case it takes hydraulic pressure on one side of it and moves. This is a piston of a type of a piston assembly, and it's got seals around it to hold hydraulic pressure, and it's going to act this way. You see there's a lever. Well, down in here as we take this apart you'll see this more clearly, but there's a band here. It's called a kickdown band, and a band is basically a type of, it looks like a lot like some kind of old-time brake shoe. It's actually got material on it, and a band is kind of a spring steel, and when this thing operates it tightens that band up, or it releases it, and when it tightens it up it serves to stop a rotating piece in the transmission, mainly a drum. It's called a drum, and it's got just around, you'll see it later, but anyway that's what that does. So this thing it's got hydraulic pressure on the end of it, so when conditions are correct for this to operate, then a valve will move in here and it'll reroute pressure, and then it'll pop this up, and that thing will clamp down on that drum and stop it. And depending on the kind of transmission you got, that either gives you like a gear shift, or it may allow the transmission to be held in like manual second or manual low instead of trying to shift up to the next gear. So we'll go into that more in depth. The rear servo back here, this is the low reverse servo, and again should be a band on this, and this is the band adjustment on that one. You have to get into the pan on this one. The one I showed you before, I said this was the kickdown band adjustment. It's external on the outside. You adjust that one externally, but this one is internal, and you always adjust these on a torque flat transmission. That's part of the service of these transmissions, and we're going to cover all that in detail. Now the procedures for removing this valve body tell you to do a couple different things that we've already done. One is you can have we remove the park neutral switch. It would normally be in here. It's got that lever right. I've been accused of not using my pointer, so I'm sorry. I'll make sure I do that. But Anyway, it acts on this lever, and then this lever is acted upon by this is called the manual valve. And what happens is, this lever that you see here, I know we're in a little bit of a bind to see this, but this is a selector shaft. This is a lever that is connected to the one we removed, that when you move your gear shift gives you the different gears. You got one way it'll be in park. This is your manual valve, and goes all the way in the valve body down here. And as this lever moves, you see that it's able to act upon this valve and move it. It's got a little tip right there, and as this valve gets acted upon and it shoves it in further one way or the other, it gives you reverse, gives you neutral, gives you drive, etc., etc. So that's what this is, and we'll see more of this coming up. And this is a pretty neat combination of things here. You've got to give you a little bit more light on the subject. Click, 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 click. But if you look in here, you see that this is all on one plane right here. It's got one simple shaft coming up, and this bottom, the one that's closest to us, drop it. The one that's closest to us right here, this is called the throttle valve lever, and there's an external part of that which we've already removed those two. You'll have to remove those, but we've removed those two, so we don't have to worry about the external part that's outside the transmission. But we're looking at the internal part, and the internal part, if you take a look, if I can get you in there, we are in tight quarters here. If you take a look in there, that is against, you see that's against the end of a valve right there, right here. Now, I said I questioned this, that this had too much clearance in it. You see how much this moves before it starts to hit that valve? So we're going to look into that and see it's spring loaded. It pushes that valve in. That's your throttle valve. That's what controls your line pressure in this transmission. That is critical that every bit of this is adjusted correctly, from the carburetor down to the transmission, even to the internal side of this lever. So we're going to investigate that thoroughly. Now, like I said, we've already got the external part of these levers removed. We did that in an earlier step. If you wanted to, you could wait till now, but I don't suggest it. Just go ahead and do it while you're out there. So what we need to do to get this valve body out, we've got an E-clip, which is right there. You're going to need to remove that. See that right center screen? That's called an E-clip, and that is in your park, that retains your park rod. Your goes right through there. You'll see that. That's your park rod right there. So we'll need to take that, pull that clip off, and we'll need to position that so that when you lift the valve body up, that park rod will not hang up. It'll come out of this little receptacle there. Again, hopefully trying to explain this so that you understand the theory. Park rod is controlled again by that manual lever, what I call the manual lever. It's called a selector lever, but the selector lever, let's think about this. Selector lever does a couple different things. First off, I told you that it controls what gear you're in. As you move your gear shift down, you know, to get the different gears, it acts on this lever, moves this manual valve in, you know, and that's how that works hydraulically. And then of course it ties in, like I just showed you there. You have to have park somehow. You have to lock the transmission, so it also serves to engage park by that rod that I just showed you there. So after that, what we will do, it's pretty simple. We're going to remove 10 bolts out of this valve body. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are hex head bolts, 7/16. Nowhere, no how does it say take these screws out right here. And you see we've got 3 that are popped up. That's where the filter goes. I've just put them back in for safekeeping. But do not touch these flat screws, these slotted screws right here. Not at all, not right now. Don't touch them. The only thing we're taking out are these. Let me do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they're 7/16. And what I did is I made myself a very accurate drawing of the valve body and made my holes where I need to. So excuse me, if we take bolts out, I'm always paranoid about it. If you take bolts out and they're different sizes, different lengths, you know, or again, we don't want to do this to throw them in a pile and then guess where they went. That's not a professional way of doing a repair like this. So you take them out, put them exactly where they go, and then put this thing up someplace where it won't get knocked over, where the dog won't get it, where the kids won't get it, where you won't forget where it's at, on and on. And I also helpfully labeled this valve body just in case you forget what it is. So I'm going to proceed with that, and when I get ready to lift this valve body off, I'll turn you back on and you'll see the proceedings. Okay, I got one bolt left to take out of this valve body, and so before I took it out, I went ahead and took this E-clip out back here. I was telling you about. It goes pointer, goes right here, goes right on there. Hopefully you can see that clearly. It just pulls out, and what I did is I just took my good magnet I've got, telescoping magnet, and just kind of held it over there adjacent to it while I pried it out so it didn't go flying someplace in the transmission, and then I bagged it and tagged it and stuck it to the side down there. So we got one bolt left, and hopefully we're ready to free this valve body from its home of 43 years. So I'm going to put you back on my shaky camera stand that I'm missing the adapter to. I have to actually tie it with a bungee cord. That's how cheap I am, because I lost the adapter and I don't know where it went. So, like our governor here in Alabama likes to say, everything's going to be alright. We're going to be okay. So, nobody worry. I blew through another one of these gloves just now. I think these are a bad idea. Hopefully I won't. There we go. See if I can get you there. Okay, that. I left that last bolt, that one right there. Let's take it out. And as I showed you also, I've got my schematic here. This is my official bolt retaining fixture, 7/16. And these were in pretty tight. We'll go, like I said, when we put all this back together, we'll follow our torque specifications. But a couple of these I noticed they weren't as tight as the rest of them. So I've been having a kind of off day that night, whatever it was. So there again, let me just tell you again, remind you, like I said, when I train people at work, I remind them several times of things that you need to do at a particular step. And again, when you take the valve body out, make sure you have the neutral safety switch removed. Make sure you have those two external levers that I showed you on the outside of the transmission on the driver's side. You know, we took the two bolts out one at a time. We lifted the top one off, and then we lifted the bottom off, and then we took the seal out. Now, you don't necessarily have to take the seal out, but just make sure you take those two external levers off by this step. Take those off before you take the valve body off. It won't come out. So, there you go. Now, these look to me like they're all the same size, so that's good. No problem. So, you know, if you don't want to bother this step, if you just want to bag them up, that's fine. You do whatever you want to do. But like I said, I just try to be careful, especially since I'm a greenhorn at doing this. I won't screw anything up. Okay, now in theory, this valve body should come out. Oh, it came loose. It's loose. So what I have to look at here is I have to make sure that this slips off this parking rod over here. And it is. Boing! Were you thinking that some check balls and springs and stuff were going to fly out of this? Wow, that was kind of anticlimactic, wasn't it? So, let me show you something again here. this is a lot better view of this manual valve lever. So let me take you off the stand here. We'll take you off the stand and we'll look at something closer, a good closer look at it. You know, I wish I was one of these people that could just easily just run along and say everything just in a constant stream. Some people make that so easy, and I have to kind of stop and start and say something again, and I apologize for that. I know I watch some people's videos and they stop, start, and they stammer, and you think they're gonna ever start talking again, but I'll try to keep this rolling pretty fast. So let's take a closer look. This is the transmission side of the valve body. Now, as you can see, one thing you notice, there's no gasket in this, and these are all your transfer ports for different things. And I know I just said different things, but right now we're not going to concern ourselves. We don't want to overload you with too much information. TMI, we're not doing TMI right now, we're just disassembling. So nothing popped out, nothing went flying, there's no check balls at this point. They're going to come out and be lost, so don't be afraid of that. You can see this thing is quite dirty. It's got residue on it from the clutches, probably over time burning themselves up. I think somebody towed a boat with this thing. Look in there, you see well, come on Tyler, show where you're looking at. See that gunk in there? That's clutch residue. It's up here, cracks and crevices, a lot right there. Yeah, look at that. Look at it, I say, look at it. I could probably get that out with a pick right there and give a glob of that. Look in there. So this thing's gonna have to be definitely cleaned up. It's really dirty. It's got a lot. That's probably, like I said, when we get into this thing further, we're gonna probably find all the forward clutch. I don't mean to ruin the surprise for you, but based on what it's doing, we're probably gonna find that the forward clutches on this forward clutch pack is just smoked on this thing. It's probably just gonna be ruined. There's probably gonna be no clutch material left on any of the clutches. But we will set this aside and do other things now. We have to continue our disassembly process. I saw a 73 stamped into this somewhere. Oh, yeah, there it is. There's your date code. See, that says 73. It's a 73 transmission. Now, here again, this is a lot better view of this. This, when we were looking at the outside of the transmission externally, and this is the part that stuck up out of it, and it had the throttle valve, and it had the selector lever out there for your gears. And this shows you a lot easier to see without peering over in there what this does. This is the shoe right here that when it rotates around, when you this is the manual lever. When this thing rotates to give you different gears, it gets up. In theory, this one wasn't working right, but in theory it gets up against the inhibitor switch, the neutral safety switch, and obviously if it's in neutral it'll start, if it's in park it'll start, if it's in any kind of gear it won't start. So you see there's spots where it would not allow it to make contact, I guess you could say. And there again, here's the manual lever. This is still a part of this, and when this thing rotates, it's obviously going to push this lever, this valve, the spool valve. This is called a spool valve. Pushes this in to give them different gear positions, and then, well, there's my first spring that went somewhere that I'll have to find. Whatever I said about springs not popping out, disregard that. No, we'll find where it goes. I'll just go back and look on the video if I have to. But peek in here again. Let me. This damn light I can't ever keep track of. Here's a good shot of that throttle valve right there. That's the lever that acts on the end of the spool valve for your throttle pressure. That's the valve right there in the center. And that's how that works. Pull this. Oh yeah, very good. Here's a very good example. That's how your manual valve works right there. It gives you different gears. You see, oh, I see what happened. there's supposed to be a little thing in here. That's what popped out. It's supposed to sit in here, and it's got, I guess it has that spring behind it, and that little ball bearing thing, I guess, went flying out someplace. I have to find that. But normally this would detent right here. We're going to cover all that in much more depth, so let's not obsess over that, but that's where that's going to go. And now I've got to find that thing that flew out. Okay. Next step coming up.